So we're going to try something new here. A couple times I've been asked, hey, would you just sit at a whiteboard and talk? Meaning, don't be so prepared. Just sit at a whiteboard and talk. Actually, I love doing that. It's pretty difficult to do that with lighting and things like that on camera. So I'm going to try something new here with my iPad. I have an iPad with a whiteboard on it, and I'm going to screen record that and put that together in a video and kind of do it a little free form here. And I thought the best topic to start off would be to talk about PIM. So the role that PIM and product information management systems have in both digital strategy is pretty significant. But there's a lot of questions like, where does PIM, like why is PIM needed? Where does PIM fit into the e-commerce ecosystem? And then I think a core thing to talk about here is that the differences, the use cases that are different between manufacturing and distribution actually represent a difference in digital strategy for manufacturing and distribution. So it's kind of a cool place to be able to start here. So let's start off with product data in general. Where does product data sit today? Without a PIM, it really does focus on product data. And so today, product data typically, without a PIM in place, product data exists in the ERP and Excel files, email, PDFs like PDF data sheets, catalogs, and so there's a question about like, well, why not put more information into the ERP? If the ERP is the lifeblood, as we've talked about so many times, the lifeblood of the organization, why not put more product data into the ERP? There's a problem with that. And the problem is that the ERP is very expensive. I have a dog in the office that's barking. The ERP is very expensive. And it's expensive mainly to change and adapt. So ERP today holds internal product data. What does that mean? So it means that all the data in the ERP is meant for the employees in the organization. So for example, the description of the product is a description that's very focused on your company. So the description can have acronyms and abbreviations that make sense to you and your employees, but it's not customer facing. So what you end up having to do is need to add all customer facing things about product information to the ERP. So you got to have a better description, customer facing. So if product information is typically built for externally for your customers or your channel partners, and especially if it's used for a website, then it needs to be in their language, right? So you have to add new descriptions, you have to add all the attributes, you have to add all the images and all the attachments, and to do that in the ERP is just very expensive. Adding attributes to an ERP is very expensive compared to a system that was meant and built for adding attributes. Especially these legacy ERPs, what it's like to add an attribute to an ERP is a very painful process and a very expensive process. Typically takes development in the ERP to make it happen. Which is why that PIMs were built. First of all, PIMs were built to be customer facing, for customer facing data. And PIMs were built to be flexible and adaptable. So they're built for flexibility and to adapt. Meaning adding an attribute to a PIM is expected. So there's business tools, just add an attribute and you're done. The cost is very low and pretty insignificant. The next thing we don't really have, the next reason is that, like, for PIMs, getting data in, if you ever tried to get data into an ERP and then data out of the ERP, it's very painful and expensive again. PIMs were built to get data in and data out. And then last thing is governance. Like, there's just rules about how you want your product data to look. And the governance of that, the process and workflow that that data needs to go through is why PIMs were built. So PIMs, to address the needs of the ERP not being able to manage all this data, they were built to be customer facing, have customer facing info, very flexible, adaptable, get data in, get data out, and then be able to manage all this with rules and governance is what it's called. So data governance, and you maybe have heard that term before. So that's how we start with product data. Now let's talk about the PIM itself, and we can talk about the functions of the PIM. So PIM, so when we typically talk about PIM functions, the first thing we'll do is that you'll hear this word or phrase, it's a single source of truth for product data. The source being the key there. So let me just write that in quotes here. A single source, for product data. Single source of truth. Source being one of the key words and truth being the other. Truth is governance, meaning the data is correct because it's been gone through rules. Source is like just the place to store it. Like, it's a centralization. It's the place to have that. So the first thing that a PIM does is it does store. It's the source of truth, right? It stores product data. The next thing you can do in a PIM that's most relevant for you is you can enrich product data. So what does that mean? That means you can change the description. You can add an attribute. You can add a digital asset. You can add an attachment. You can write long form about that product. You can attach a video. So you can enrich it, make it better is what we're talking about. And that, when you're talking about product information, product is a program, product content and information is a program, not a project, meaning you always have to be doing better with your product content all the time. So being able to enrich it. So you can, it's about attributes, images, and then storage is that just a place to keep it. We can call that by a kind of typical picture of a database, right? So store and enrich. Now, PIM data, though, I want to keep some notes here on the side as well. And keep some notes. What's interesting, I think, about product data is that product data was never, it's not about storing product data, not about storing. It is about using. Meaning the only reason you want to store product data and keep a source of truth is that you want to use it. You want to use it in a bunch of places, in a bunch of systems. So this part, when we think about PIM functions, the next thing we talk about is that we need to, along with storing and enriching it, it has to go somewhere. And we call that syndication. It's called publishing or syndication. Syndication is the ability to push out that data. So the data can go to an ERP, it can go to a CRM system, and go to an e-commerce platform, it can go to channel partners. There's a ton of downstream, we call them downstream systems that would use this data, and you do that through syndication. Syndicate, you also might hear this referred to as publishing. So publish or syndicate is what you'll hear that as. But when we kind of look at this picture, what we see is, okay, we store, enrich it, and syndicate it, but we also need to bring that data in. And that concept, bringing data in or aggregating data or uploading data, whatever it might be, the concept is called, there's a couple kind, but ingest is a common way to represent that. So ingest, it's also called aggregate. So data has to be brought in so that we can store it, so we can enrich it, so we can get it out, right? So data in, have a place for it to sit, let's make the data better, and then let's publish that data out to everywhere that needs that, right? So those are the core PIM functions. One last piece that kind of runs through all of this is one of the biggest things, as we talked about this, kind of PIM idea governance, is the data quality is a box here that kind of runs across this whole gamut, right? So data quality is important. Data quality as we bring it in, as we store it, as we make it better, and as we push it out, data quality is one of the most primary functions. We want the data to be good. We want the data to be complete. So data quality becomes one of the primary functions. So that's what a PIM does as a response to the ERP being expensive to be able to change and really not built for the kind of high speed volume of PIM. Now, how does this differ between manufacturers and distributors? It's a pretty key question. So I want to start over here with manufacturers. Now, when we think about a manufacturer sells through a distributor that sells in e-commerce, right? So we have, let's draw that. So we have a manufacturer, right, that makes products, and they make product and then they sell that to a distributor, and the distributor sells to a customer. I mean, that's typically the way this B2B works, right? It's B to B to B, right? B to B to B. That's what most of obviously it's much more complex than that, but that's a simple way to look at it. When we look at e-commerce, typically the most valuable part of e-commerce happens here. So I'll draw this as a cloud, not a good cloud, right? E-commerce happens between distributor and customer. E-commerce can happen in other places, but this is the most valuable. It's the part where the product content is most important. Product content becomes most important here because the customer is purchasing a product that's solving the problems from the distributor. So when we look at a manufacturer, what's interesting about a manufacturer is because the distributor sells, a manufacturer's typical digital strategy is the first priority is to support the distributors e-com strategy. Right? So support the distributor's e-commerce strategy. So the manufacturer that owns the product is there to support the distributor's e-com strategy. What does that mean? So that means we have to actually go to the distributor's strategy first. So let's tackle that. So let's look at distributor. So if you look at a distributor's PIM, a distributor is when they're looking at their product data, right? So when we look at this PIM or product data, because that's what it's there for. A distributor typically is, when we think about where does that data go from the PIM, that data typically goes out to just a couple places. It might go out to their ERP. It might go out to their CRM and other places, but the main place that that PIM data is used is in their e-commerce platform, right? So that product information, that description, that attributes right here, and we see this strategy here, that e-commerce is done by the distributor. The PIM, typically, the most valuable place that data goes to is the e-commerce platform. We should color that different. Now, why does that matter? Well, it matters because how do you get data in? So a distributor doesn't own product data, right? The manufacturer is the one that produces the product. A distributor typically has maybe hundreds of thousands of products, maybe millions of products. They can't build this data on their own. And so where they get data from becomes really important for a distributor. And of course, they're going to get data from, their ERP and their Excel spreadsheet and their PDF catalogs and data sheets and things like that. But the biggest source of data for a distributor is from the manufacturers themselves. So we have manufacturer 1. So we have ERP sending data, Excel sending data, PDF sending data. We also have manufacturer 1 sending data. So Grainger, if Grainger is the distributor, this is 3M, right? Manufacturer 2 is sending data. This might be Honeywell. Manufacturer 3, and then a distributor often might have hundreds or even thousands suppliers or manufacturers. So they need to get data from their manufacturers into the PIM. That there are platforms out there and technology out there that just focuses on this aggregation piece, like getting data into the PIM. The PIM might be completely separate, and there's another piece of technology that actually brings data into the PIM. They actually specialize in manufacturer to distributor syndication, the manufacturing syndicating or publishing content to the distributor. There's a bunch of rules there, right? That distributor probably wants the data in certain formats. They don't want things to come in centimeters when they're trying to do it in inches. So this is the distributor's PIM. The distributor's PIM ends up being heavier on the left side. The real challenge is, let's do this in a different color. The real challenges for a distributor happen over on this side of the equation, getting data in, because they have thousands of manufacturers. It just becomes a really difficult thing. So let's come back up here to the manufacturer then and address this. I didn't even leave enough space, but the manufacturer has their PIM, which is data again, right? And typically they have also ERP, Excel, PDF, but because they're the originator of this product, they're the ones that create it, often you also have a couple other things like a product lifecycle management system, a PLM system that might be feeding data in. So their data is internally generated, right? Which makes sense. A manufacturer though, might send their data out to an ERP, their own ERP. when they're looking at publishing this PIM content. They might send it out to, their CRM, etc., just like we saw on the distributor side. However, for them, they have thousands of distributors, or dozens of distributors, at least most of these guys do. 3M has 1,000 distributors minimum. They probably have a couple thousand distributors. So if this is 3M, they want to get their data out to distributor 1, which is Grainger. And then distributor 2, which is McKesson, even though they're in, not that they're the second largest, McKesson's in the medical field, but 3M has medical products, so they got to get out here, right? So there's hundreds, there's dozens or hundreds or even thousands of these distributors that you have this content on. So for a manufacturer, then this part of the equation, this part of the equation becomes more complicated for them. So we come back here to this diagram. We have distributors that really operate on this side. Let's draw this in yellow. So distributors are on this side, and manufacturers, let's do it in green, manufacturers are on this side. So you find that within a PIM, even though you're storing and enriching, you're always bringing data in, you're always getting data out, you typically have solutions that are a little more distributor focused or a little more manufacturer focused. If it's more manufacturer focused, you're going to get more syndication platforms. And so if you look for product information syndication platforms or product content syndication platforms, you're going to find a lot of manufacturing platforms. In the retail world, they publish to Walmart and Amazon and Target and Home Depot and Lowe's. In the B2B world, they publish to Grainger and McKesson and Cardinal Health and all these, Office Depot, whatever it is, right? Probably not a good example. Staples would be a better example as a distributor. On the distribution side, you have platforms that ingest data. And so on the retail side, you have very kind of specific ways that retailers bringing in data. But in B2B, it's a little more wild west here. But there are platforms that focus on the ingestion side. And then there are platforms that do all three: ingest, enrich, and syndicate. I hope that's a helpful way for you to see how this stuff is broken out. I also suggest that there are probably use cases that fit better into manufacturing and some that fit in better in distribution as you go through this process. I hope this amazing whiteboarding session was good. I don't know if it's good or not, but we'll edit it and see how it turns out.